Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is at the Brown County Library in Green Bay. We're interviewing candidates in the 2014 elections. We're interviewing Mr. Jay Schroeder of Neenah. He's a Republican candidate in the 55th Assembly District. Mr. Schroeder, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you for having me.
Just this note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Mr. Schroeder, let's start with this. Could you give us a short bio and qualifications to run for the Assembly, sir?
Sure. Well, my name is Jay Schroeder. Of course, I'm married, have 4 children. That's kind of what motivates me to keep Wisconsin the way it was when I grew up. I'm kind of the citizen that I want to get involved in the government, and we can't spend more than we take in.
Have you run for anything before? Do you hold any local office?
2 years ago, I ran for the Assembly. What motivated me to run was, of course, Act 10, which everyone knows. And I like to look at it that I was the candidate that kind of stood up for that. And because I thought the potential it would help the Wisconsin, and now the facts have proven it, from the deficit to a surplus.
So you think Act 10 was good public policy?
Yes.
Why?
Well, the $3.6 billion deficit to now almost $1 billion surplus. And that was fueled by that.
Okay. I notice on your website you signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. What does that mean?
What that means is the government can't spend more than what the people get for raises. As an example, I was on the Town of Menasha board. The increase in the general operating revenue was 2%. Mm-hmm. Social Security in that year was 1.5%. And I look at it as, how can we spend more than people are getting for raises? So that means I won't raise taxes. With the federal economy growing and the Federal Reserve predicting growth, the revenue for the federal government and state government is going to be going up. So that means there's going to be revenue there. There won't be a need to raise taxes, and indeed, there should be any revenue given back in tax cuts.
Okay. A big issue that I'm finding is public schools. And one big issue in that is school voucher and school choice. Do you support voucher and choice schools, Mr. Schroeder?
Well, I can answer it for the big perspective. I went to public school myself all 12 years. I have one child in parochial school, so I can see it from both sides. Vouchers, I guess, as a Republican and a business person, I look at competition. So vouchers would create competition, but most importantly is, how do we educate the kids the best? And that's the procedure we have to do. Whether it's public or private or vouchers, how do we get the best grades for the teachers and the input? So it's what works is what I'm saying, and how do we best do that?
So you think some of the charter and choice schools for those parents that choose it are a pretty good option in public schools?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
If you're elected to the Assembly, you'll be voting on the next state budget, of course, the 2015-2017 budget. Right now, in the next school year, the number of choice students outside the city of Milwaukee and Racine there's a 1,000 student cap.
Yes.
Do you think that should be? Do you think that cap should come off in the next budget?
Well, that's the cap. If you know the history in the state of Wisconsin, how it's evolved, it's giving people the choice to do what they want, and it is their money. So should the voucher the cap come off? I think if nothing else, it should be increased geometrically, and then you see results-based education. Maybe it's 5,000 or 10,000, or take the cap off. But as you do it, then you gauge it constantly. So there's never, white and black. It's evolving and analyzing it as it goes along.
Now, this is your second campaign, so you've knocked on a lot of doors. As you run this year, are you being asked about the Common Core standards? And if so, what are you telling those voters, sir?
Common Core, I talked to some. Neenah School District, I believe, has stricter requirements than Common Core does already. So the ultimate is in the parents and in the school board. So if we do that, and as an example, West Bend has opted out of it. So that gives each school district the ability, if the parents don't like it and the school board doesn't, as in West Bend, opt out and do your own plan. So there is already a tool to do that, and it's called parental involvement, getting involved from the bottom up instead of the top down telling us what to do.
Some of the candidates that I'm talking to, although I don't know if it's in your race, are saying Wisconsin, as a state, should opt out of Common Core. Do you think we should, sir?
Well, you have to look at all what Common Core is and what it means, but I look at West Bend as already the example. If you believe in local control, don't you believe then that each individual school district can do it? Because if you don't, well then why do you need the state to opt out? You see what I'm saying? So you can have a blend, and if the parents and the school board doesn't like, opt out.
Okay. Let's talk about health care. The federal government told all the states, if you expand your MA benefits, we'll pay the cost of expansion. As you know, Governor Walker and the leaders of the Assembly and Senate said, federal government, thanks, but no thanks. Do you think that was a wise decision?
Well, the thing is, you have to analyze when the federal government says we'll pay it. That's not forever. That's phased in. You know, I don't know, I believe it's 90% and then it goes down each. So on the surface it looks nice, but you have to look over the term. Is it going to be fully federal funded? No, and it's not. And how can I answer with medical field? My wife's a physician, so I know truly what goes on. And the federal government was designed to have states as experimental. Each state is an experiment. So if you have states that are taking it, states in Wisconsin haven't taken it, you're going to be able to compare in the future and see which one works the best. So one size doesn't fit all. Each state's supposed to be an experimental pod, I guess I would say.
Since your wife is a physician, let me ask, how does she generally feel about the Affordable Care Act?
She, well, I can't speak for herself, but my impression is it limits doctors. I can give you an example. I, this morning, had basal cell carcinoma taken off my shoulder. When I used to go, and I've had, you know, 4 or 5 of these things, it's a non-aggressive type, in case the audience.
Yeah, I've had a few myself.
So, but the moral of the story is, it used to take me a week to get in there, to get it removed. This time it took a month. Now I'm wondering, why is that? So is that, you know, healthcare is going to slow down? Because anytime you nationalize it in other countries, it has. So I'm always looking at, it's the Deming model of management. You always look at what's going on, what works and what doesn't, and then you try to adopt what works. But if you have a historical background that this type of medicine doesn't work or it leads to long waiting lists, I don't know that that's the best thing to do.
You're well aware of how important transportation and good roads are to the Fox Valley. Highway 41 linking, you know, Milwaukee and Green Bay.
Yes.
But there's a $650 million projected shortfall in the next 2-year budget for the Department of Transportation. So do we delay some of these major projects, or do we raise taxes, or is there another solution? Jay?
Well, one of the things that I have looked into, and I have it on my flyer, is I'd like to analysis of the gas tax, how it's sent, because from what I understand, $3 billion has been spent in Madison and Milwaukee on the Zoo interchange and Marquette interchange.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, and my question is...
Just the Zoo interchange alone, $1.7 billion.
Right. My question is, are our gas taxes from the Fox Valley going down to some of that? That's what I would like to know. But more importantly, you mentioned that the deficit. My question is, from what I understand, that's a wish list deficit. That's not general maintenance. It's like making 4-lane expansion or whatever. So do we really have it? I don't think so. I think it's a wish list deficit.
We get most of our transportation money, as you and what you and I for our license plates. Would you consider under any circumstances raising those taxes, sir? Fees?
The license plate is, I believe, if you compare to the Midwest, it's quite high now already. For the fees, I just think that you have to always look at it geographically. Like I said, it's kind of high now. If we're in the Midwest higher, you have to want citizens to stay in Wisconsin and move to Wisconsin. So whenever you say taxes, you have to always analyze the Midwest. Are we high, medium, or in the lowest? Because over time, people flow like a river for where there's least resistance, and that means taxes. So I'd have to look at how we rate, because I don't ever want us to rate in the top 25 tier of anything in taxes in the United States, and right now we are. So, and that needs to be changed.
Because it's so timely, I'm asking all the candidates this question. What's your reaction to Judge Crabb's ruling on same-sex marriages, sir?
Well, I found that very interesting, because last year, my understanding is the U.S. Supreme Court more or less had states have the jurisdiction to decide, and it's Justice Kennedy. He is the swing vote, and that's what he said. So when this all evolved, and then, you know, and I'm like, why is this all being talked about? Why are we doing this? because just the ruling last year said states have their jurisdiction. So, and I found it interesting. First, Judge Crabb rules that way, then she stays her own order, which maybe somebody said, hey, by the way, in Miser last year, the states have jurisdiction. So I look at it that way and like, why did we do all this? Because now we're back to what it was. And the thing is, like Justice Scalia said, you don't like the Constitution? There's a process. It's called amending. Right now, Wisconsin had voted for for marriage between a man and a woman.
Yes.
You don't like that? Go through the procedure to change it. But right now we have that, and in my opinion, the U.S. Supreme Court last year said we have the ability and the jurisdiction to do it.
Do you have a personal opinion on same-sex marriage?
Well, I've been married for 20 years myself. Now the question is, when you say same-sex marriage, what does that mean? Does that mean 2 women or 3 women? You know, you have to understand when you do something, there's always what's the next step. So you have to be careful with that or structure it, because it opens the door. And no one I've ever heard say has answered that. What does that mean? What's the next step?
2 candidates for Attorney General say first offense drunken driving should be a crime. Do you believe it should?
Well, I'll tell you, I've driven 1.2 million miles in mortgages. My brother-in-law was injured in a car accident, and there was alcohol involved. So, and I don't drink and drive, and I think, once again, you have to compare the costs, but you know what, when lives are ended or whatever, if it's a good incentive, so my answer is yes, I do.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
It's being debated in Washington and Madison. There are plans to raise the minimum wage. What's your position?
Well, the minimum wage you have to look at historically too, once again. What does that mean? You know, they say $10.10. Well, why is that? Why don't we make it 20? You have to understand, I have kids that work for minimum wage. And you know, one of the things, my son applied for a job a month ago. And the employer told him, they called him up and said, you know, you can only work for 28 hours. And I asked my son, why did they say that? And they said, because of the Affordable Care Act. So here we are limiting our kids, but yet we want to raise the minimum wage. The Affordable Care Act says my son can only work 28 hours. And then you want to raise the minimum wage? How do those 2 policies gel? Raising the minimum wage isn't a panacea. That's for entry level. My first job, I worked $2.35 an hour in a greenhouse. It's a start. It gives you experience. If you're a good employee, you get raises. But you have to have a lower amount to let them in, to let the people know job experience. So it's a starting point. You're not going to work that forever. And if you're a good employee, that's what our country was founded on. You'll get raises and promotions, and you know that's how it's designed to work. So we arbitrarily come up with a number? No.
Understand. Is there any other issue that's a central part of your campaign I haven't asked about that you want to mention now?
Yes. You know, everyone talks about job creation. The state or government doesn't create jobs. So I look at, in the Deming model, what works? What has done that? The states, 9 states do not have a state income tax. In the last 5 years, I believe, 3 million jobs were created. 62% of those jobs were created in 9 states. The other 41 states created the other 38% of the jobs. What does that tell me? That tells me we have to look at reforming our tax code. Now, some would say, well, those 9 states, that's tied to petroleum. And to some extent it is. But the historical answer to that statement or question, in the last 50 years in the United States, the majority of the jobs were created by states with no income tax. Now, we have to look at doing that. We have to look at a flat tax. We have to do procedures or initiatives to do it, to bring the jobs. Any politician could put on a flyer, I want to create jobs. Well, you know, like in medicine, you're gonna attack the symptom or the cause. The cause is tax policy in the state of Wisconsin, and it has to be changed.
The income tax, as you're aware, brings in, the personal income tax brings in 7 or 8 million, billion a
right.
year. Excuse me, let's correct that.
Yeah.
Billion. Some of those who say, well, if you do away with the personal income tax, you're looking at a sales tax of 13, 14%. Your answer to that?
Well, the answer is you would, it's called like a glide path. Maybe you could do it 2 or 3 biennial budgets. But again, as I've said from the beginning, you have to do these things. Maybe you do a phase out of it. You don't do it cold turkey, you know, one year we have it, when we don't, and it drops. Maybe you raise the sales tax a little to offset the income tax. The whole principle, or the idea of, like what I said, in the last 50 years in the United States, jobs were created in states with no income tax. That's not Jay Schroeder's opinion. That's the historical answer.
Okay. Do you want to highlight any differences between you and your opponents in the primary, Mr. Schroeder?
Well, most of the opponents I don't know.
So,
No. But the one thing I think differentiates me is I've worked hard. I believe in this. I went door to door, 2,000 doors so far. I have a policy, or like I say, I want to restructure the tax system. And I've signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. To my understanding, none of my opponents have done that.
I see. Very good. Jay Schroeder of Nina is a Republican candidate in the 55th Assembly District. The primary is August 12th. Mr. Schroeder, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.